Beardy and the Beast Media Club.
Ba-da-ba, ba-da-ba. This is a placeholder intro song.
Thank you for joining us for Beardy and the Beast Media Club, a full spoiler discussion into a piece of media. We will not cut out those spoilers like so many cybernetic body parts. If you enjoy what we do, please share us with your friends or join the conversation in the comments or at our Discord. My name is Drew, and as always, we have fellow Hunter Warrior, Dev.
You know it.
Today we'll be discussing 2019's Alita Battle Angel. So, Devin, did this piece get its mark or did it manage to escape?
All right. So I'm going to go with both. It managed to escape being a bad live action anime and thus hit its mark.
To get this out of the way, the majority of live action anime adaptations aren't bad. We just get the Hollywood ones.
Yeah. I actually watched some of the Kenshin ones recently.
Yeah.
I also, watched Death Note, so I hate it myself. That's why.
Like the American Death Note?
Yeah.
You might as well have watched the American Dragon Ball Z.
I've seen that too. I'm pretty sure we've seen that one together.
Dragon Ball Evolution or whatever?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Did I just hate watch it?
Didn't we all?
Maybe. I mean,
Look, it
Yamcha
wasn't
was
memorable. There's no discussion.
Look, in that movie, Yamcha, I believe, was he's a K-pop star, like a first-gen K-pop idol.
I think so.
And
All I know is after Shameless came out, we finally saw Goku and Bulma get together. God, that movie was terrible.
I know we're like completely off track here, but I didn't realize that James Marsters was Piccolo in Dragon Ball Evolution.
Oh, I'm sad now.
Yeah, Jun Park was Yamcha.
Yeah, I don't know. You remember more about the movie than I do.
Usually the case with those. Yeah, so I was gonna say Dragon Ball Battle Angel, Alita Battle Angel. It though definitely better than any Hollywood anime adaptation. Fell into the same problems as pretty much all anime adaptations, and that was too much for one film.
Did a little bit of reading on that. I think what happened, because like I know we've discussed this before, like this was something that Cameron was very passionate about doing.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately he didn't get to direct it himself. Like a lot of the work that he's done with his documentaries, with a lot of his films, was to be able to do Alita. He's wanted to do it since like 95. And apparently when Rodriguez took over, who apparently also is a big fan and really wanted to see this project go through, he cut down the script some, which could be why it kind of feels that way, because it feels very breakneck. So I think Rodriguez trimmed down the script a bit because, well, Cameron isn't afraid to make a 3-hour movie. Rodriguez might not have felt like he wanted to.
I don't even think it should have been a 3-hour movie. Like, I don't think they should have. In fact, I think they should have trimmed it down. This would have been better served being and I say this about all anime adaptations, like the old 9-episode HBO or Netflix, you know?
Yeah.
You know, just some hour-long stuff, lots of character development, lots of point of views, and really work with the format.
Mm.
But to me, this felt like the first live action Ronin Kenshin movie of like the recent ones. It was like the first 3 story arcs all crammed into one movie.
Yeah.
And the first one doesn't have to be universe defining.
Mm.
Like if they were to keep the same story outline as was already there, starting with the whole drama of like, I'm not even from Earth or whatever, and I want to be a hunter warrior, like that could have been the movie.
Mm.
And then you could have had like a second movie, which would have been continued Hunter Warrior, the drama with the Motorball, Motorball, and they could have expanded on that some instead of having that being kind of a fleeting thing.
Yeah, that's fair. Like, I know Cameron wanted to do a trilogy with this, and this takes up about the first, I want to say about the first third of the manga.
Mm.
Like, because it's like 9 major volumes,
Mm.
and this is the first 4. And I think part of that, I mean, it's going to depend on where the storyline ends in the volume. Just might need to throw in that 4th volume.
Do we think then that they might have tried to remain too true?
Possibly. So it's been a long time since I've watched Battle Angel Alita.
Mm-hmm.
So I know the OVA did a similar thing where it combined a couple of storylines, but I think it took like the beginning and end of the storylines more, much in the same way that Akira did.
Mm.
So I think he had the vision to help tie it together, but with who knows if this movie will get the sequels that I think it definitely deserves. That could be telling as well. Like, I kind of agree, like the Motorball stuff kind of feels a little tacked on, but it's also, I don't know, I feel like they integrated it well enough. Like, it doesn't feel tacked on because it didn't fit the movie. It feels tacked on because I want it more.
It definitely didn't feel added for like action beats or anything. It felt, it felt out of place because it wasn't actually that meaningful. Everything revolving around Motorball could have like easily been stripped from the film, like her participating in it.
So I think the reason they couldn't, so I think there's kind of 2 reasons they couldn't, and this is where I say the cut down, like cutting down a bit of the script affects it, is while Motorball isn't something that, like, something she's interested in, but, she seems definitely much more interested in being the Hunter Warrior.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone around her is tied to Motorball. Ito, Chiren, Hugo,
Mm-hmm.
all of the, the whole plot with Hugo stealing parts, the whole idea of using this to get up to Zalem. It's not integral to Alita's story, but it's integral to the world's story.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, it should have been split. Definitely should have been split. And it's maybe they were too afraid to like cut things up for an adaptation. Not that I'm suggesting major changes, just simply not all crammed into one movie. It felt long. It really felt long.
See, and I always felt it feels dense instead of long. Because thinking of the storyline we have, where would we really have a climax to the film? Like, where would you split this into 2 parts?
You could easily do something leading up to like the climactic moment being the showdown with Grishka in the underworld. That could have easily been made into a whole movie on its own. And then you have your down note cliffhanger to whatever the next project is. The problem with this is it's not a format or a structure that appeals to general audiences, because that kind of density and like constantly pushing the story forward so we can get to the next moment just to fit things in to the format doesn't appeal. Like, I like this movie on my first watch, but on this rewatch here, it felt long, it felt too much, felt like the story just kept going after what I felt would have been a natural end. And that's kind of my opinion. Like, pretty much anything I approach discussion from this is from the personal opinion that I think it should have been 2 movies.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
And I would have watched both of them and probably enjoyed both of them.
Oh, for sure. So, from my side, if I was going to really kind of cut anything, it would have been the ending with Hugo. Like, that part is almost what I would have.
Yeah, but that is like a very, like, if we were to keep it one film, I'd probably agree. The problem is that is a very symbolic like scene, I guess you could say.
Yeah. It's and I think that's where the issue kind of lies with that is you don't know if you're getting another one because, well, there's a track record for these types of films. Right? Even when you have James Cameron and Robert Rodriguez's names attached to it, there's a track record. So you're gonna put in a story as much as you can and make sure you cover the major points. The big reason why I feel like Hugo why I would have changed that part is, to me, the relationship between Alita and Hugo is the weak point of the film.
Oh, agreed.
And I think that's where the idea of, like, ditching the motorball and stuff comes from. Not because it's not there, it's just because I don't believe the Hugo-Alita relationship. I believe Alita, I don't believe Hugo.
Oh, for sure. And part of the problem that I had with that specific scene, like if we were to bring this down to a one movie format, I would definitely cut that out. And there probably is a few other things that I'd cut out, but what pissed me off about that scene is there was almost no lead up. So Alita saves his life. This entire group puts like everything on the line to get him this new to him body. And then as soon as he wakes up, he ditches and he tries to leave.
And it's worse than that, because he was literally, not the most believable thing, but he was literally turning his life around at that time, where it seems like, maybe I can not look at Solemn, and just immediately goes for it. It didn't have the room to breathe.
There's no logical way they'd be able to fit that in.
Mhm.
It would have made more sense if he just walked out and gave himself up to authorities.
Yeah. Well, I think they needed to express his quote unquote inner conflict about Alita and Zalem. And it was a thing that they tried to do.
Well, I mean, and if it was two movies, that could have been an entire large like subplot that could have been explored well.
Yeah.
Instead of like Motorball didn't feel tacked on, but the ending with Hugo certainly did.
Yeah. And they wouldn't have had, like, I don't even feel like they would have had to do too much with it. Like, they could have just literally, not saved Hugo. And everything else still could have played out the same. Though I guess that's kind of important for Chiren, that they saved Hugo. So
I'd be more interested with Alita taking that box with Chiren to Ito. Because we have brains, eyes, and hands.
Yes.
They literally can make people with that.
Yeah. There's a better connection. Yeah, Hugo's just there. Like, yeah, that's the part that really hit me while I was watching it. It's not that the story was bad, it was just not believable. And that's a shame, because everyone else around this film was believable.
What's the thing? He was in my 2-movie arc. His character makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
If the climax of the film ended up being the showdown with Grishka. And then they're fond with each other. They have a post-scene moment after she gets her new body. Then in the next film, they can start expanding from there, making Hugo a believable character, having his own storyline. And maybe that's where my dissatisfaction comes from. Hugo's not enough to bring it together, and an amnesiac battle girl is not enough to hold a movie together. You need those other character relationships.
Yeah. Well, that's why I love the relationship with her and Ito. It feels quick, but that's because we don't really have a good idea of the passage of time. But I mean, their interactions were believable. It didn't surprise me that she called him father at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they built up to it properly.
Well, it's a thing, like, at no point during it was I questioning how much time has passed.
Yeah.
And that can generally be a failure, and that depends on, like, it's just how the script was crafted.
Mm-hmm.
It means that there was more affection and concern in the dialogue from point A to point B in a ever-growing scale. It just means that you believed the transition.
Yeah.
And that's something that I thought was probably strong in the script writing, even though the majority of it, however well acted, or in some cases not, there was a lot of weak writing, like dialogue wise.
I didn't mind that too much. I mean, it was very actiony type dialogue, like
Yeah.
action film type. Right?
Well, part of it has to do with the pace of the movie too. I don't see a logical jump from I want to become a hunter warrior to standing in the bar and doing some impassioned speech about how we're doing this for the greater good.
So
There wasn't enough time to romanticize the profession.
I don't think. Well, I think that's kind of purposeful. I don't think if they tried to romanticize the profession, it wouldn't have worked quite the same way because everyone's going to be like, yeah, no, these guys are not the type of people that are going to fall into that.
Well, it's all from her point of view, though, right?
So I read it a little bit more as some of her memories leaking through, even though she didn't recognize it. Like, it's that military, I'm a commander, here's the threat, we can see it's a threat, step up. Is how I read it, and it ended up being misguided because she doesn't know the world.
I could see a read of that. Like, I don't see the logical progression of it because aside from when she was in combat, that one time we don't have any indication that this is a common occurrence of like bleed through like that. So, I mean, I get where you're coming from, but like the speech was out of place. It didn't make sense. That's another thing. Like, impassioned speech didn't even need to be there.
I think we do get the bleed through. This is just the only verbal bleed through.
I think at that point we only had the one combat.
Wasn't even the one. It wasn't even the combat. It was the way she came down the stairs on her first body, and she's moving, like just the way she's prowling down the stairs. All of her movements were that bleed through, that instinctual.
The only thing that was exceptional at that point is just how well she adapted to an unfamiliar body.
She didn't walk down the stairs.
No, she crept. She didn't prowl. She was no more than a toddler trying to sneak a peek at Santa Claus.
I think there's more to that. And I think that's where they're going with when we're talking about how she's instinctively doing this. Same thing when she goes and saves the puppy. Like, there's that type of movement.
So yeah, I would give instinctive movement to that. Some type of like battle capabilities, but I don't know. It still doesn't really change the point though. Script writing itself was very cheesy. I did expect at least a little bit more complication to it. Obviously not as long and drawn out as, say, Ghost in the Shell.
And it's one of those things, it's like, and we've talked about this before, it's like, I always wonder what little things get cut out. Like, even if it was just a minor thing, there might have been something else there that just expanded that little bit.
Well, and to accentuate that point, another problem ends up being the little things that get added in. So, like somebody with some influence being like, oh no, there's definitely has to be flames on the side of that car to make it look cool, you know, like that's not important. It's a muscle car. You don't need the flames to make it look cool. It already does look cool. Just to accentuate that point, like things cut out and things added in that shouldn't have been.
I didn't see anything about things being added in to the film, like specifically. So it's hard to say. And this is a very different case, that quote unquote meddling that we've talked about in other films. Because, well, it wasn't really. It was just slightly different creative directions, but mostly on the same page. So I can see kind of why there's a bit of confusion around it. And part of it too is like, I'm not familiar with the manga itself. So I don't know how accurate it is to that. Like, it is very possible that, you know, Hugo is what we got, right? And it could be one of those things where it's like, sure, there's enough in the 3 volumes, but then the 4th volume, which kind of ties it up, there's not enough.
Oh, you mean like how sometimes they'll like amalgamate entire multiple characters into one character, or one character becomes multiple characters?
Yeah, right. So yeah, there could just be little things missing around that. I think the place where it's again either lengthening it or splitting into 2 movies, things like I'd like to see a little bit more of Chiren and Vector around as well, and just how they're interacting with the world, because we don't get near enough Jennifer Connoly.
Well, and the thing is, like, she was probably the most complex character.
Mhm.
Like Chiren had very complex motivations and had a very different way of viewing the world, while not being a protagonist or an antagonist. So there was a lot of interest there, but you know, one moment she's just looking mean, and the next moment she's a brain in a jar.
I mean, it just goes a lot to speak to Connolly. I mean, she didn't have the most, but you could feel the conflict that she had, and right, like the conflict at seeing Alita the first time. Yeah, we just needed more of her, and like her and Ito interacting, or her and Alita interacting somehow. Obviously, there's connection. She's going to feel just as connected to Alita as Ito does, even though she doesn't necessarily want to admit it, because she's moved on from her daughter's death. There was sarcasm there.
Yeah, we need more Sharrons and no more Sharrons. Yay. She was definitely the most convincing, but Alita herself, it's funny to say from like a character whose facial movements are like computer generated and whatnot, that she was more convincing than the majority of the other characters.
She was cast really well.
Yeah, cast well. Obviously, like the whole technology thing, but it's even in the little things, like the simulation of pores, for example. Like, was it the body acting was definitely on par. Like, whereas on the other hand, like Ito came off corny. Hugo was unbelievable, and I can't remember if the nurse said anything. He had like what 3 lines.
Yeah. Ito was corny in a way that I would expect. Like, even going back to like ideas like, way back, like Astro Boy and stuff. It's that it was the right type of corny.
Well, I look at it as the other half of the coin when it comes to like our Sharron trope. Instead of like a child actor hemming it up, or like being too childish for the actual age demographic they're trying to portray, or not applicable to the scenario that they're in. I saw Ito's acting was on the level where you would expect a Sharron to be on the other end, for him to be communicating with that Sharron. But the only thing that I believed from him was the scene where he was like, "You go out there and then you come back right here, and like make sure to wear this." So like I believe that to it.
See, this is where I kind of go with. I mean, I guess in a way we're both saying the same thing. Like, the film is a bit rushed. It's that either split it into another movie or give it a little bit more room to breathe.
Yeah, it's all crammed together. We're talking about a movie that effectively has 3 endings.
I disagree with the first fight with Grishka being an ending. That's a midpoint climax.
Yeah, how it's displayed in the movie as it is takes 2 tweaks to make the proper movie climax.
Yeah, I guess no. All right.
Again, we're saying the same thing, as in the movie as it stands is not structured well.
Yeah, for different reasons, but yeah, I think it.
I mean, the motorball thing is an arc on its own.
Yes.
Everything up to that was the 3 arcs preceding it.
So what we're saying is get rid of Hugo so we can hold off on the motorball.
No, Hugo makes sense if it's 2 movies.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Jubilee was in this film.
She was?
Yeah, Lana Condor, Koyomi.
Huh.
It was Jubilee in X-Men Apocalypse.
Oh, that's right. Didn't they cast like 3 different Jubilees in the X-Men films?
Which is funny because most people like Jubilee. Like, it pretty much goes freaking Wolverine, and then freaking Gambit, Jubilee, and
Rogue.
Yeah, Rogue are all on the same. And that's your 2 tiers, and then it's just everybody else.
What was it about Ito that you didn't find believable more?
I already explained that in detail.
Yeah, I guess I'm not. I don't. I don't quite see it that way. I'm just trying to wrap my head around that. Because then I found their relationship at the very least very believable.
At the end, yeah. At the end and at the beginning. But after being repeatedly called out on the differences between him and his previous daughter, and after admitting to Alita that it was his former daughter's body, there should have been some type of relationship shift. I'm not saying the negative part is in the relationship. I'm saying the negative part is in the acting of Ito.
Okay. Okay. I'm making that fit in my head better now.
Yeah, it's simply just I don't think the lines themselves were any worse than the rest of the lines in the film.
Mm.
In fact, better than some, worse than others, like most things. It's the delivery is
Okay.
what didn't make it believable. And that's why I brought in like same coin as a Sharron.
Yeah.
Sharron technically makes sense in Silent Hill.
Yeah.
But it's the way that the lines were delivered and like
Yeah, because Sharron took away from the emotional relationship.
it should have added to.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. No, now I'm getting where the coin flip is. I think that's the part that wasn't connecting.
To expand upon it, even his real daughter wasn't that young.
Mm.
Be babied in such a way. Like I understand how concerned he was, and how they're like how she was differently abled, but it was like he was treating Alita as if she was half that age. 8 instead of 16.
Well, I mean, to be fair, they straight up basically said that. Oh, she's older than you thought.
Yeah, but in that case, the difference there was like 14 versus 18.
Yeah, I know. So
I also thought that particular scene or moment was unnecessary.
yeah, it's like a coming of age story, all in a single scene.
Oh,
So this is one of these things that I wonder if could be explained with the bits of world building we didn't get for like Ito's overprotectiveness in this, because we actually have no idea what Zolom is like. I don't know, were they kicked out? Did they choose to leave? Like, if you've got a disabled daughter, why would you choose to leave instead of being in the higher tech area?
I mean, all questions in hindsight. For the majority of the movie, I had forgotten most of it. For the majority of the movie, I was wondering if Zolom was just a dead city and there wasn't actually anything up there except automated processes.
Mm.
Because there was no actual building of anything in Zolom itself.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just don't. You kind of have to take it how it is.
Well, these are just questions that entered my head through the film as well, and I think it can kind of build on that, because like it could have been a different enough type place, which I'm assuming it is, where Ito's literally seeing all of these dangers that even his 14, 15-year-old daughter wouldn't have seen anything like it, that it could put an extra level of overprotectiveness. And especially when he is, basically, being a bounty hunter, dealing with all of these not very nice guys, it can explain that overprotectiveness, even though it doesn't necessarily be there.
Well, I didn't have a problem with overprotectedness. There's a difference between being overprotected and like literally babying somebody.
Yes, but not everyone recognizes that.
Like the actor.
I've seen parents that are like that, where they think babying and overprotective is the way it is. Like, it's not something that it's outside of how I grew up, but I know plenty of people where it's not.
This does bring to mind for me, though, one piece I would have liked for them to expand upon to some degree. Wait, what's the city called again? I forgot already.
Iron City?
No, the floating one.
Zolom?
Zolom. Yeah, you said it like 6 times, and I've even said I just kept forgetting. There's only 2 things that we know concretely about the culture in Zolom. Because technically, they never even describe Nova's position there.
They strongly hint at it in multiple places. In Alita's flashback, they're literally talking about how Nova is is their main target for Ern. So that is putting him in a political leadership position. And we know he's been alive for at least 300 years.
Point is, we know that they excise weakness and effectively import strength. So, what was it? Ito and Chiren were removed because of their daughter's inability to move or illness.
Yeah.
It's just, there's so little about the culture of Zolom that it's hard to consider anything about it. They didn't do, a good way to put it is what we discussed about John Wick in the past. Like, John Wick never actually really says anything about himself. It's everyone telling everyone about the fable of John Wick. No one really tells the fable about Zolom. It's like an empty aspiration that no one expands upon.
See, but that makes sense to me because of the disconnect. Right? Outside of Sharron and Ito, Zolom is a myth, is just a myth to these people. Like, we're talking 300 plus years, right?
But then what's the point of it being an aspiration? Like, people make it up themselves to the point where you say, there's streams of gold or some desired resource is plentiful. Whispers and rumors. It's something that I wish they would have expanded upon. And then in the inverse, shown the whole, like, what I was kind of rambling about, like, excising weakness and importing strength.
Some of it is like a perspective thing. We, like, other than Ito, who clearly doesn't want anything to do with Zolom, everyone else only just knows that it's the floating city and stuff is sent up there and the trash is sent down. So it's just the, living in the gated community versus not. All you know is that the gated community is better. And we don't get enough time with Chiren, who actually would likely give us a bit more an idea around what Zolom is like. So
it's just another weakness in the film that I found.
See, the thing that I didn't mind that so much, mostly because of Hugo and Alita's interactions, because most of the film is coming from Alita's point of view. She doesn't care, and that's shown very clearly. It's just the idea of the I want, not seeing what you have, and I think that's the bigger focus. So it doesn't really matter what Zolom is like. And again, I think that leads back to why it's so weak with Hugo at the end.
You don't understand his motivation, why he wants to.
Yeah. Other than it's not the slums.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's generally not enough. Like, at least in the gated community, people would say the grass is literally greener over there, or there's less crime, or et cetera, right? Like, there's always a foundational reason more than it's not here.
Is it not enough that they clearly hype it out that the, biggest reward for being the sports ball champion is getting to go up to Zolom? Like, isn't that enough for, like, most people to go, oh yeah, clearly that's what I want? Like, I'm questioning is, like, do we need that exploration?
Well, if I was like, hey Devin, if you do 6 slam dunks in that sports ball net, I'll send you to Kasumi Land. You don't know what Kasumi Land is. Probably know it's just a land where there's lots of pointy things. And you're always walking, shin into coffee tables. That's Kasumi Land.
Yeah.
It's just a lack of motivation there. And part of it just stems down to the fact that it was just too much for one film. As an anime / manga adaptation from the Western market, it's strong. As a unique standalone movie, it's pretty average. I do give it bonus points for the technology because I believe the CG.
Yeah.
The computer graphics in this were top notch.
But
I mean, we have characters that aren't believable, motivations that don't make sense, corny characters, and just too much.
I got to think on this. Thanks, Drew.
I mean, I would still give it a positive rating.
Yeah.
Because you really do have to consider what it is and in the what marketplace it is. Yeah. Like, if I wanted to introduce someone into anime or comic books, this would be a strong show.
Yes.
This and the ScarJo Ghost in the Shell.
Mm-hmm.
The ScarJo Ghost in the Shell would probably be the best technically because everybody loves Black Widow.
Yeah.
Except people who watch Black Widow. Um,
Yeah.
I haven't even seen it, but I still maintain it's the greatest movie of all time.
Oh, obviously.
But if I were to show somebody this, I would definitely turn off the film right at the point where Hugo was saved and he was lying on that table.
Mm.
Cut everything else off. Myself.
Yeah, honestly, that's where I think it needed to. I don't think they wanted to end it on quite that type of down note. And I think that's probably why they pushed in that last little bit.
Is it? She's not a criminal. They think he's dead. He lived.
It feels like an Empire Strikes Back type ending, whereas with the ending of in her and the murder ball, you get that defiant aspect, which kind of uplifts the emotion of the film. Again, assuming even though we know they want to make sequels, them assuming that they're not going to get that, it's not the best point to end the film.
It's a major problem with perspective. I think I've been getting this theory for a while. I've been thinking about this theory for a while. A lot of the time we have a problem with a movie like this, it's because the consideration that we always give is we know they were concerned they wouldn't be able to get a sequel. I think they should still pursue the vision with the intent that there should be a sequel, and if there isn't, then I mean that sucks, but at least we get a good story that makes sense and we don't have Hugo's running about.
That's fair. Again, this is where I said at the beginning too, like I'm not familiar enough with the manga to be able to say how this worked. So I can think of other pieces of media that I'm familiar with. I think The Golden Compass is an example of this. They ended the first film in a slightly different place than the books. Like they ended it like a chapter or two beforehand, and the story felt so out of place and made me go, I don't know how they're going to continue this. If not that they ever made the second film. So I wonder if there's a consideration there as well. That chunk that we would say put into another film just might not have been a good kicking off point for another film.
It's weird just kind of looking at the old wiki, the old Gummin wiki. It looks like Hugo and Alita met in the third arc, the Hunter Warrior arc, fell in love, and that's where he died. And the Motorball arc is legitimately just the next arc after that.
Yeah, and that's they did merge kind of the two arcs together, probably in an attempt to give Hugo some more meaning.
That's honestly that's probably where both of our troubles come in. Me thinking it's too long and too much, and you just with Hugo. It's definitely not a case, as I suspected beforehand, that it was trying to stay too true. I think it's more a case of, I think this might have been greed. This might have been graphic greed. Maybe they did a treatment and it was just the first three and like they didn't like the flow.
Yeah.
Like I could see that being a case, and then just tossing in Motorball. It is actiony and they can drive some, It honestly, from what I understand, they even like skipped a good portion of the Motorball arc. And reading what I'm reading here, it seems like they just like stripped out some key pieces, tacked it onto the Hunter Warrior arc, and then hope it made sense. Probably to, I think you're very correct in your analysis, to make Hugo have more meaning.
Yeah.
Honestly, I didn't mind Speed Racer that much, but I would take this over a Dragon Ball.
Oh yeah, Speed
Or
Racer
Speed
was
Racer.
exactly what I wanted for it to be.
That is very true.
I have no problems with Speed Racer. It's exactly what I expected from a Speed Racer film.
He barrel rolled a car and shot a laser out his butt. Like that's all you need.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the inverse to this, though. Actually, inverse is the incorrect term, but that was a great adaptation, but as a movie, it was just terrible.
Mm.
What was carrying it was the fact that it was an adaptation, where this is, and like, just to add some positivity to what I mentioned earlier, I said this is a mediocre movie. That's still miles above the majority of Western adaptations.
Oh, God, yes.
It can only be considered bad as a movie if you start comparing it to Japanese manga adaptations. Like I heard the Attack on Titan stuff is really solid. The Kenshin stuff is good. Oh, what's his name? Oh, it was actually pretty good. I need to know now.
I feel this stands closer to some of those Japanese ones. Some of them, not all of them. You know, while you're looking that up, I think this could kind of go back to that same type of thing. Like, this is clearly
Later the
done
Immortal.
by.
Clearly done, sorry.
This is clearly done by people who are familiar with the source material, have a passion for it, and had the means to have no one necessarily say no or point out where things are. So it's almost it's almost too much familiarity.
To change your perspective on that, we have okay, this because it's really complex. So it was Cameron and
Rodriguez.
so Rodriguez is so Cameron wrote it in part,
Mhm.
and then Rodriguez directed it,
Yes.
and then Cameron produced it.
Yeah.
So, and they're both fans. So we have a case where the director is not necessarily going to push back on the producer is not going to push back on the screenplay. The director is not necessarily going to. And then as long as the vision is expressed in an appropriate way, the producer's not going to push back on the director. Like it's just this serious case of like I wouldn't give it, the go for it's, but what you're saying, like no one to say no.
Yeah.
Is apt. I think that is a good explanation of what might have occurred.
Yeah. And I mean, again, this is where I kind of go to like it looks like it was about 60 pages of the script. So about a third of the script was removed from what I'm seeing.
Oh yeah, it should have been 2 movies if a third of the script was gone.
Well, two and a half hour movie is not unusual for Cameron.
I wouldn't have watched a 2.5 hour Battle Angel movie. I don't think it's strong enough for 2.5 hours.
But again, like, what would the strength like? It's speculation, kind of beside the point.
Yeah, that's
true.
I agree with that.
Because we're both saying, sure, you wouldn't watch 2.5 hour one, but you'd watch 2 hour ones.
Yes.
Right. So, I think what could have happened then. So, Rodriguez cuts down the script a bit. Fine, but you have 2 fans, and they're going, oh, but this is important. But this is important. These are the important story beats that need to be there.
Mm-hmm.
So a little bit of the connective tissue is what got cut. And I think that kind of fulfills both of our issue with the film. They wanted the beat, so a bit of the connective tissue got lost. Nowhere near as bad as, some films that I've seen where it's literally just here's here's the cool scene. Like they kept it tied together, but just not as robust as it should have been. Be it expand the movie by half an hour or make it into 2. Either way, we needed the film to, like we've said in many films, it needed to have more room to breathe one way or another.
Yeah, it definitely either needed more room to breathe or just a whole bunch to be cut out.
Yeah.
And I probably cut out a bunch of stuff. I probably would be complaining about it right now. So, yeah. I mean, to analyze myself, I would definitely be like, but they cut out a bunch of stuff and they didn't even try to stay true and blah, 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 blah. Like, I know how I am. Apparently,
Yeah.
in this top 10 list, Alita Battle Angel actually scored better than the Ronin Kenshin movie,
Huh.
which, given the first Ronin Kenshin live action and the fact that it felt even more cramped, yes.
Yeah.
Like just from like the story beat point of view, I agree with that. I did
But
find the Kenshin
Roni,
movie more entertaining.
the problem with the Kenshin movie, the first one, because I think the later ones
Yeah, they
did
kind
much
of.
better. Yeah. But I mean, you have you take an anime that's what 96 episodes in 3 arcs and put all of the first third into a single 2-hour movie,
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
right? And they did the exact thing that you're talking about in the second and third movie, where they split the arc. They split the second arc. Now, at the same time, again, much like the Kenshin film, knowing it's like, where do you cut it? And
Just scrap Kenshin, make a Sanosuke movie, and you're good.
there was not nowhere near enough Senosuke Seno in that film.
The and that being said, like I liked Kenshin more, but Alita was less cramped than Kenshin was,
Yeah,
and it was still cramped.
yeah. It's the one thing the live action version of Ghost in the Shell did right, or one of the big things that it did right, was it made Ghost in the Shell less dense without taking away from Ghost in the Shell. And that's not easy. And that's part of that could be part of it too. I mean, like Alita is again one of those seminal cyberpunk films, like stories, right? It's right up there with Ghost in the Shell. It's right up there with Akira. So I don't envy the person who's got to figure out a way to trim the fat on
I
on a
have
film like this.
I have the same response every single time.
Mm.
You're gonna do a live action, make it a short series,
Yeah.
go like OVAs or whatever. I would have much preferred, and I'll say this every time. Like this is
Oh yeah.
not just directed at Alita, but I would have preferred this to be 6 1-hour episodes.
Yeah.
It could have
It's
played better. They could have expanded on every character.
it's knowing the medium, and I mean, we're getting a lot more of these limited series.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, even at the time, like the time they were making Alita, it was still before that, right? The movie came out in 2019, but I mean, you've been working on it since what 1995,
Yeah,
really?
in 2019, I wouldn't be saying Netflix. I'd probably be saying like HBO.
Yeah, but even then, this is
I
like I agree with what you're saying. It's this is one of those films that was kind of produced and like kind of in the cusp as we're getting more of these better limited run series, right? And again, it's you've spent the better part of 2 decades trimming it down to this, and then you'd have almost the same issue expanding it to that afterwards, right? Like Cameron is passionate enough about this that he delayed the sequels to Avatar to get the effects and stuff done in this film.
I mean, this film's
It's
better than Avatar.
well, that's not hard.
I'm not even joking. That's not a flippant
Oh,
true joke.
oh, oh,
I mean,
oh.
Alita's body was like her berserker body definitely was made out of unobtainium. Coincidentally, that's also the metal that they use to make the drill in the core, which gets harder the hotter it gets. All right, that being said, if I was a warrior hailing from Urn, my number would be 65.
I think I would be honestly 79.
Thinking about this movie more critically did not do any favors for it.
Yeah.
I remember really enjoying this film the first time I saw it, and when you put this on the list, I was like, sweet, I like that film.
Yeah.
Having watched it with a more critical eye, especially when it comes to things like character development, plot progression, linear or otherwise, and trying to be objective about the way characters interact with themselves, honestly, I probably lost 15 watching.
Yeah. Can't maybe my opinion is definitely a little bit more subjective. I love this film.
It's a good film.
Because if you're right, if I the criticisms that we kind of discussed they're the same criticisms I had before anyway.
Hmm.
It was that so that's
You
never something that's taken away from my enjoyment. If I'm being a bit more objective, yeah, I would have to go nice. um, but
I mean, that being said, you have more of a habit of watching films more critically than me in a non-structured setting.
yeah,
Like, I hop in and I want to see people punching people with lasers. Like,
yeah,
you know, I liked the X-Men movies.
yeah,
I mean, they're bad,
yep,
but I like them because you want to see a dude with claws and a dude with laser eyes and like a girl who can run through walls or shoot fireworks out their hands.
yeah.
Um, hashtag do a Generation X remake.
Yeah.
Greatest movie of all time after Black Widow. What we need is we just need more superhero movies.
Obviously. um,
Anyways, yeah, to the point, this is a great entry vehicle for getting someone interested into these characters if you wanted to say get them onto watching something like an anime or alternatively getting into the comics.
mm,
Much like how Ghost in the Shell would be a great entry vehicle.
regardless of the plot points, they like the issues we both raised with the film. I'd like to think we're both in agreement of I want more of this though.
Oh yeah.
I like they set up a good world. They set up interesting, mostly interesting characters, at least the ones that survived. that I want to see more. I want to see Alita, finishing Erm's mission and taking out Nova.
Well, it didn't.
Or
Well, I guess that's the thing. It to just boil like everything that we've discussed down to was they seem to include so much because they were worried about not having a sequel, but left so much in the air
Mhm.
that it really needed one anyways.
I think Nova should have been like. I didn't mind that he was mentioned throughout, but they could have done something like not have him take control of people, so he stays the Emperor, the nebulous Emperor that we don't see in the first film.
I
Just
mean,
know he exists.
the taking control thing would have been like a pretty cool point in a second movie.
Yes. All right. Yeah, just little things like that. But no, I want more. I love this world. I love watching like Rosa Salazar was fantastic.
Well, they had her in a body get up too, didn't they?
Yeah. So most of it was there, and most of the motion capture was so they could keep her, and so they could expand her eyes to give it that more anime look, while still keeping most of her there.
I'm still amazed. I wasn't bothered about it. They did something with it that didn't like uncanny valley it for me.
Mhm. Yeah.
Which, like, one would think it's impossible, but it didn't take long for you to get used to it.
Yeah.
There was only a few angles where I was like, eh.
Yeah.
What they did for her, they thinned down the entire bottom of her face, so it was a triangle from the base of her neck outwards.
Yeah.
Instead of just having a pointed chin. Like, that
Yeah.
was what was weird to me.
Hmm.
I know that's a nitpick, but
Yeah. But no, it's saying something that they managed to do that, and it doesn't take you out of the film that she's
Mhm.
got these bigger eyes. I mean, like they did a lot of things visually. It was amazing. Like apparently they actually had like a bunch of X game players, like skaters, to do all the motorball stuff.
More importantly, I still don't have my one-wheeled motorcycle, even though that's been something that people have been trying to get off the ground for like decades.
Yeah. I mean, you get those
Sad.
one-wheel you get those one-wheel scooters like in Carol and Tuesday. I have seen those.
Anyways.
What's the Angela cut?
Hashtag remake Generation X. With that, this has been Beardy and the Beast Media Club. Join us next time where we discuss the Foggy Isle Film Festival in a special interview with Ashley Good. As always, if you enjoy what we do, give us a like and a share, or join the conversation in the comments or at our Discord. A full list of services that we're available on is at beardyandthebeast.com. Later.